Oh, that was handy. I've got an extra ding there. Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's edition. This week's edition of the Inworld Review, full of mysterious dings. We don't know where they came from, but we'll put that aside for a minute. Oh, and I've got a cute little doggy next to me. Okay, my name is Mal Burns, and this is a show where we kind of look at arts, destinations, and installations, all sorts of things, in virtual worlds that are actually run on the Open Simulator platform. Better still, all these hundreds or thousands of grids, unlike, say, early grids like Second Life, are actually all connected to each other via the hypergrid. So it's a simple matter of teleporting yourself from one location on a particular grid to another location on that grid, or indeed anywhere in the hyperverse, I suppose that's the word I will use for today. Anyway, sitting next to me on the right is James Atlloud, who's our resident sitter and knob fiddler. Knob fiddler. He mixes the knobs for the vision and the desktop and the avatar positions and everything else all together so that we bring you a show that's a little bit more exciting than talking heads, or should I say avatar heads. So welcome, James.
Oh, thank you, Mal. Thank you for bringing us all together.
Of course. Well, that's what I'm here for.
Yep.
Ain't no good at anything else. Right, and on my left, my wonderful co-host, also the convener of Hypergrid Safari and all sorts of other things, is none other than Thirza Ember. Hello, Thirza.
Hey, hey, Mal. So good to be here once again.
Indeed, always good for you to be here too. Yes. Now we have two guests who I'll be introducing a bit more fully in a short while. But I'll introduce them basically by their name first of all. We have Stephen Xootfly, who's from the Science Circle grid, basically. Welcome, Stephen.
Thank you, Mal. Glad to be here.
And I'm not going to even try to pronounce my other guest's avatar name. It doesn't make sense. Thierry Gayer or something. So I'm going to call him Robert because I know his name's Robert. Welcome, Robert.
That'll be fine.
He's also from the science grid, so at least we're in tune on that front. Right, okay, so to get down to business, as it were. Okay, got a picture on screen just advertising the latest release of Open Simulator. It's about 3 weeks old now, but I'll just keep the slide there for those of you who need it briefly. And now I'm going to move to the web, and we've also, this is pages that are going to come up in a short while. Okay. Right now, this show is actually changing quite a little bit. Our hypergrid roundup. At the end of this show, we're not going to be doing anymore. We're going to splinter it into a second show at some point. More on that when we know what the hell we're doing, which won't be too long. But I will point out that Thurza's site hgsafari.blogspot.com has destinations about Safari and similar things. Her latest post near the end of the week was about on Einstein, and it also relates to an event last night that sadly I didn't make. But what were they doing? They were launching a new starship on the Star Trek grid or something.
That's right. Yes, they were. Basically they have a ship for every day of the week, in a way, so that if you do role playing, depending on the day you're available, you can join the ship that has role playing on that day. And so there's a new one, Einstein.
But of course, every single starship, except for the rebuilt Enterprise, is now being controlled by the board, isn't it?
Apparently so.
See,
Somebody's watching TV.
I
Right.
know about these things. Yes, I do. Yeah, no wonder there. Okay. Two posts also from the alternate metaverse grid, which is alternate alternate.blogspot.com. They're running some kind of autobiography sort of feature. The first post is looking at a blog contestant, Richard Yumi. They're just talking about virtual worlds in general, which is very much our cup of tea, although obviously in their case the focus is of the alternate metaverse grid itself. And Yeah, there's only a little bit here you're seeing in reader view, but interesting website. So alternatemetaverse.blogspot.com, and on the same site, um, this is autobiography from Cataplexia Numbers. As you can see, she's apparently said that she doesn't want to her post in the contest, but that hasn't stopped her making the post, if you see what I mean. So we are very familiar, of course, with cataplexia, so some nice pictures there to go with that. Right, moving on down. Most of the ones going okay. Hypergrid Business has a post up. David Karuki has sort of got his list. Number of open sim grids has hit a record high, and there we are. It actually has a list of the most popular grids this month. I'm never well. There's alternate metaverse. They are actually number 4 anyway. OS Grid is always pretty high. I keep forgetting Digital Worlds always comes in quite high, though we don't get to go there that often. Not sure why. Soul Grid.
Oh, we're going this season. Going to see some.
Oh,
What are we going to see? I can't remember now. Anyway, yes, we are going there soon.
We're getting those, making up for lost time, basically. Okay.
Yes.
Neverworld, the wonderful good there is exactly there at 10. Yeah, Wolf Territories at 17. Craftwell's down at 16. That surprises me, but never mind. Anyway, it's hardly important. I guess it's just down to the number of users that log in. And also some grids don't report their figures, and then others like the Fred Beckhausen's setup don't record figures in the same way that the other open sim ones do. So it's a bit of a mishmash, but a good site for if you want to find statistics anywhere. Maria's site there is probably the best for statistics, and well, probably just statistics really. Okay, and we won't be covering these in any other way today, but also in the week Safari went to the good place, and hgsafariblogspot.com has a report on that.
wonderful.
We'll be
Yes.
we'll be covering that. Oh, I keep wanting to show the pictures, but we've decided that's going to be a separate program now. And Safari goes. Oh, that's sorry, the wrong one. Xar Gazing. This was the second stop of the week there.
Another
And
fantastic location. It was wonderful.
yeah. It was great, yeah, absolutely great. It certainly was. And also, this is an old one that Thirza dug up for me. I forget how many years ago, but it's a post called Safari Goes Looking. And we visited somebody called John Snow. He says, "Oh, glad you made it." And he was told by his colleagues at Westminster Medical School. That's near me. I'm in London. Oh, right. Right. Okay. Problems with sonic. No, sonic cholera and onlook might not sound an appealing mix, but they're an odd mix. I'll say that. But there's not much to it here. But this they went to at Red Grid. And this was a sim at the time, modelled on a pioneer medical detective, Dr. Snow. So it was all about the transmission of cholera and stuff like that.
I wonder how many of us are alive because of snow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Most of us probably.
Point.
Yeah.
Yeah, good point. Yeah. Anyway, so that's the web roundup for there. The other ones I'm coming up with in a second are for our guests. While we're at it, I'll just get them out of the way. These are actually the pictures from Thurza's old blog on Red Grid. Is that Jon Snow in the centre, I guess?
No, I think he's in the background. In front is
Yeah, with
Stephen
the hat.
and
right.
Kim Anubis.
Oh, right,
Am I
right.
right,
It's
Stephen?
himself. Yeah.
Yeah, that's close. So on the left, that's me dressed a bit as Jon Snow, and then on the right is Kim Anubis, who was the scripter and builder, who part of her company called The Magicians. In the middle is just one of the NPC bots, and I can't even say I remember his name.
Ah, okay.
But the grid was really built around having one-on-one interactions with these NPC bots who were feeding you basically epidemiology information that was a part of the whole mystery and puzzle.
Right.
This is in the sort of classroom, I guess. It's so long ago. I can't remember. That looks like Lyra. I don't know if it is. Yeah, that was teaching about it. I get all about it, I guess.
Yeah, so I actually just presented for the Virtual World Education Council, and I really considered this what I call virtual epidemiology investigation was kind of my career capstone for having been an educator, but also trying to be a technology educator professional. And so the Jon Snow investigation was an opportunity for students to go in one-on-one and play the role of a student of Jon Snow and to go through what Jon Snow did. Again, in this scenario, you're pretending to be what Jon Snow actually did in real life, which was in 1863. There was a cholera outbreak on this one block of Soho, London, and he went through step by step, asking various people when they got sick or people who were not sick. And he tried to put together all the clues for why they were developing cholera. And the main lesson that we learned from history, as well as what we're trying to do in this, again, this is the answer if anybody wants to use this as a classroom project later, but that the people who drank water directly or indirectly from this one well, they were the ones who developed cholera, and the people who did other things did not. And so this gave both credence to the idea that pathology was being passed through water, and it was a lot of information contradictory to the miasma theory of disease at the time, which was that pathologies were passed through the air. And so that's what the scenario is trying to set up, and you learn this and do this investigation by having individual interactions with various NPCs who feed you information. And this is actually all based on a really wonderful book about Jon Snow written by some Michigan State authors who did a very nice biography of that event. So,
okay.
All I know is that if you drink beer and not water, you don't get cholera. So, that's what I got out of that one.
that was a bit confounding. That's because beer has two things. Is that one, because it's alcoholic, that fermentation and process and alcohol tends to kill bacteria, but actually it turns out hops also seem themselves to have some antimicrobial compounds in them as well. So that's a bit of a myth to think that all food that has gone through fermentation at the time, but that did tend to be safer than I don't want to say all drinking sources at the time, but in terms of things, if you gave water the chance to sit around and get exposed to the soil, that was bad. The other thing that was really bad about London at the time was that the way toilets and sewage worked was that it just were pipes that diverted sewage into the River Thames. And so then if you ever got water back from the River Thames downstream of those pipes, that was also not so good. But
they're still doing that.
Oh no.
There's a little racket at the moment, so they're all above their limits for disposal. Let me, I'll keep those up. I'm going to quickly, before we come to all your other stuff too, properly, I just realised we've yet to go to our little brief thing called Hypergrid Happenings. So I'm going to hand over to Thirza for that. Over to you, Thirza.
You caught me off guard.
Okay, stop dancing on your seats, people. It's Hypergrid Happenings once again, and here are 4 things that are going to be happening this week. This is really exciting. Nick Breen has got a photo exhibition of his own real-life photos and all kinds of other stuff to look at, and that's going to be happening over on Pangaea Grid. And not only do we get to look at his photographs, but there's Putri Solo will be performing. So that's on the 21st of April. It's at 11 o'clock Pacific time, or grid time if you prefer, which is 8 o'clock here in Europe. So that's going to be a lot of fun. I really recommend getting to that. Another neat thing that you may not know about is that over on DigiWorlds they have a university, the Metaverse University of DigiWorlds, and they teach various things, including texturing and all kinds of other stuff. And you can learn to be prim building if you're interested in that. Lots of people are going back to pinching prims. And so Tari teaches a course every Tuesday and between 3 and 4 p.m. That's grid time again, which is Pacific time. So worth going over to DigiCenter on DigiWorlds and taking a look at that. Another neat thing, which happens every week, but it's worth mentioning, the premier DJ of OpenSim, Lady Jo, everybody loves her. She performs over on Wolfpack in Wolfpack Club on Wolf Territories Grid, and she's a wonderful DJ. Her taste in music and the way she just blends one tune to follow the other in a theme is always exceptional. So I really recommend that. The name of the region is Wolf Territories, Colorado. So don't miss doing that. And on Saturday instead, there's a Dinkies event. This is an event over on Trianon World, which is a fairly new grid, and it's called Funsies World. So that's just for dinkies. If you're a dinky, which you might be after Wednesday, because we've got a dinky event coming up on the safari, you may want to go along on Saturday to do that. The event starts around 1 p.m. grid time. So that's just 4 things that are happening around OpenSim this week. If you have a special event, a party, a project, some kind of opening, or you teach a class, something coming up on your grid and you would like us to feature it here, please let us know. You can contact me via social media, pretty much anywhere, Thirza Ember, and we'll be very happy to include it here on Hypergrid Happenings.
Well, thank you for that, Thirza. If you want to watch Hypergrid Happenings on its own, just a couple of minutes or whatever each week, you can go to the Inworld review group page on the almighty Facebook, dare I say it. And yeah, you can watch it sort of as a standalone little snippet program over on Facebook. And just to realise, actually, it's so silly, really, we don't actually have a poster entry for the Hypergrid Safari as a coming event. We should actually make one up so that it's there
That's
every
true,
week.
yeah.
Basically, on Wednesday, of course, it will be Hypergrid Safari. It will be the 3rd week of the new season we're into now. So, do you want to just let anybody know where we're going or anything? Or is
Yeah, we're going to 2 places. We're going to Dinky's place, which is your friend Sophie Jano, Sophie Supermarine, who makes the Blah 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 magazine.
Yeah.
And she has got a Dinky's place on AMV Grid, alternate metaverse grid. So we're going there, and straight afterwards we are very privileged to be going to Kinky Haven Grid, where we've been in the past, but this time it's a build called The Mountain, which is a sort of a labyrinth build with lots of strange rooms, beautifully decorated in sort of ancient times. Look, some of it's sort of on the Buddhist side, some of it looks like a medieval castle. Some rooms look like they're Roman influenced, so it's an incredibly big build, so we won't see it all, but that belongs to Lizzie Borden, and she's over there on Kinky Haven Grid. So that's the 2 places.
Nice.
Okay, well, we'll be rolling up on Wednesday. Basically, it's 8 p.m. Pacific time, and it's on. We meet on the OS grid, and the region is Hypergrid. No, it's just called. I've forgotten that. HG Space Safari is the name of the region. That is where the clubhouse is. Basically, we meet there before traveling on. Okay. So thanks for all that. I think we've covered everything on that front. We did the web pages, didn't we? So let's go back to Stephen and Robert. I've got the final of those slides actually up there. What's the cartoon character in the front here? Anything to do with anything? Or is he just a safari person? I don't know. Okay, was there anything else you were going to tell us about that particular build and the epidemiology?
Yeah, let me just say that. So in real life, my name is Stephen Gasior, and I have been a biology teacher for a while, both at University of New Orleans and then again at Ball State University. University of New Orleans was where I got my start in using Second Life and trying to teach in virtual worlds that teach actual college level classes. And then when I was at Ball State University, they had a group called the IDIA Lab, which is a digital arts and digital multimedia institute. And I worked with them along with Kim Anubis and a grant from the teaching college there to build this interactive tool for a class I was teaching. I was teaching an honors biology class. And just to summarize, because it's something I hope I can talk about some more in the future, is that to me, Second Life was a great place where there's a lot of interesting builds and educators and classrooms and experiences you can take students through. But the ability to build stuff was something that I really found great in Open Simulator, because of the ability to build it for free, to work with other people. The NPC bot system was actually pretty nice. And so, there were times where trying to find the best tool, the best platform for what you wanted to do as an educator to make experiences and learning opportunities for students above and beyond, slides and PowerPoints. Both worlds are great, but in many ways, OpenSim was a really great place to build that type of activity. And that's something that the Science Circle is also very interested in doing. And that's one reason why they've had a grid for a long time. And the Science Circle OpenSim grid is a place where, again, multiple people who have content on that grid, and many of them, who are cross-platform with Second Life as well, have a home to put in their builds that are educational as well as science related.
Great. Now, so you, Stephen, and Robert, of course, here, both are from the Science Circle grid, or at least your avatars today are. Are you, in what way are you actually collaborating yourself, or are you both doing separate projects you want to talk about, or is a major collaboration going on here?
Well, my role
I'll go
has
first now.
basically, okay.
Robert, yeah, carry on.
Yeah, so well, let me just give an overview of what's happened over the past couple of years with Science Circle and OpenSim. Is that for a long time, my OpenSim opportunities was my own group called Virtual Islands for Better Education, which involved multiple educators. And we basically lost the ability to host our own grids, but we were all members of the Science Circle. So this includes Max Chat-Noir, known in real life as Marianne Clark at Texas Wesleyan University, and Marion Smelter, who's an archaeologist in University of Pennsylvania system. And so we migrated those over into the Science Circle grid. And at that point, it's a matter of trying to migrate into that grid and build that content up in a way where we can start getting more outreach and building up with other people. Now, at the same time, independent of our migrating over, Augustine and Chantel, who are Science Circle, who run Science Circle, and then Augustine is the IT guy for the grid, they had worked with Skip Dahlgren, who was Abyssinia, and they also were very interested in creating a tribute to the Exploratorium, which was also something that was lost in Second Life, and then now they're trying to get as much of it rebuilt in OpenSim. And that's where I think, I know Sire is an amazing scripter, and he's been kind of the point person for that Exploratorium, as well as helping other people on the grid build stuff. So at that point, I think I'll shut up and I'll hand it off to Robert to talk about that.
Perfect. Okay. Well.
Okay. Well, yeah, as indicated, my role has basically been building and scripting, to help them restore some of these older exhibits. And we have a lot more to do on that ongoing. And there's some other projects too that Science Circle is getting into, that we may be attempting to build simulations for. Basically that's what I'm doing. I have also been building some NPCs, which I hope to make into information givers that we can spot around at various locations. So we'll see how that goes down.
Can you tell us what the Exploratorium was like? What was it like, the Exploratorium in San Francisco, or what kind of building was it? What was taught there?
Actually, you see, I happen to live in the San Francisco Bay Area, and I've been an Exploratorium member for quite some number of years.
Lovely.
Back from the old Palace of Fine Arts, and now at its new location out on the pier. And we're trying, I think, to keep the same kind of feel to the exhibits. Where they're very much something you walk up to, you play with, and you learn just from the playing.
Right.
And I think that is actually working fairly well. Um,
Because people always think things like that are for children, but they bring out the
Right.
children in all of us, don't they?
well, I can tell you some experiences on that. Uh, once went there with a couple, showing them around, and at that time it happened to have a exhibit where you would put your fingers on these electrodes and turn a crank, and it would put a little shock through your fingers. Well, the wife, for some reason, was extremely enthusiastic about having her husband put his hand on the electrodes and she'd crank away. And I don't know what I'm doing. Yeah.
Well, the
But yeah, there are
exploratorium,
many.
that wasn't that the model for children's museums all over the country? I've always thought
Yes,
of it as kind of the prototype. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
I see there's a slide showing of the real life exploratorium and Second Life's exploratorium.
Mhm.
That's really interesting.
Okay.
Yes. The official exploratorium in Second Life, I believe, is more or less shut down now. There are some places that have retained some of the exhibits. I believe there's a Hall of Illusions still in Second Life, but we have our own now on opensim, and that's what we'll be trying to construct going forward, I think.
Yeah, so some of the history on that was that a scientist named Paul Doherty, who was I think, director of the exploratorium in San Francisco, he basically sponsored and helped build as Plasma in Second Life, the Second Life exploratorium. And then Paul Doherty unfortunately passed away a few years ago, and the ability to maintain that Second Life space was lost.
Yep.
And that's the beauty of opensim,
Paul,
that you can make things that are not so dependent on people paying tier. There's all kinds of ways that you can much more cheaply and much more let's say as a group you can recreate these things on a much bigger scale quite often too, because there's so much more room in opensim.
well, and that is a great big part of it. But there are a couple other aspects, I think, of Open Simulator that, on the one hand, can be kind of scary, but can also be very powerful. Is that in Open Simulator, you have the ability to basically export things as complete flat files. So you can have an open region art. So you can have an OAR, which is an archive of all the objects and scripts contained within a region. And you can also have inventory archives, which are someone's inventory. You can make full copies of these. And then there are things you can do with the permissions. But another little hidden feature that people don't appreciate in Open Simulator is what's called God mode. So if you've ever gone into God mode in Second Life, you're told, oh, you're not allowed to do that, and you've been reported. But in Open Simulator, you as a grid administrator can give those powers to people, and you can actually do stuff that changes permissions of objects. And so if you're within a very trusted community, and that's what I would say the Science Circle OpenSim Grid is that when people bring stuff in there, if anything were to happen to, say, a person passing away or dying, as long as there was some clear intent of that being passed along, then the grid administrators can turn that around and have permission to rework on those again. And so I think that's, it's somewhat scary for content, but on the other hand, it's really powerful in situations like that you can have, where we've now lost the vast majority of or a good chunk of the interesting stuff from the Second Life Exploratorium.
Yeah. Well, you have to understand that Linden Labs, of course, has to respect intellectual property because they're a for-profit corporation, all kinds of legal obligations. And over at OpenSim, it is a not-for-profit, voluntary kind of organization. So, it can be considerably looser with controlling the rights and permissions and so forth.
We did actually come, by the way. I'm we'll change slides again. To the Abyssinia build, didn't we?
That's right. A few months back. That's true.
I can't find it. I'm quickly looking around for the background film, but I know we filmed quite a little bit of it. And James, you were very keen on that one, weren't you? Yeah.
Yes, that's a beautiful build because again, it illustrates what we were saying about space and sometimes having to rebuild. But it's incredible how having such large amount of space on his regions that Skip has been able to recreate and reimagine all these places that are basically lost to most of us. Have never even heard of many of these places. So it's a wonderful opportunity to learn and sort of walk through history. So it's a great thing that you're doing there. I'm curious to know, how much does the Science Circle in Second Life, how much do the members know about or support the actual Science Circle grid in opensim?
Science Circle in Second Life has been very active traditionally in presenting seminars and presentations by volunteers, as well as moderating group discussions about things related to science or even science fiction. And so we have this usually on a weekly schedule. On the weekends, we take summers off. And what we do every basically school semester is we have a month where we do opensim or other grid touring. And so they actively support everybody getting introduced and being able to make avatars and come over to Science Circle at least twice a year to highlight those grids. Now, in terms of how often people come into the Science Circle opensim grid, they don't actively promote seminars or talks or stuff there, because you're just asking for a smaller audience. But I think that as we evolve our thinking and what we want to do with this grid, how it can be interactive, can be used for classrooms, can be used for, again, people outside the Science Circle to understand ancient archaeology or to do molecular biology type things. That's where we're going to try and build that working group a little bit stronger.
Well, that'd be great.
Croaking here, sorry. I did a couple of I don't know, it's months ago, a year ago now. I know our old friend Pathfinder Lester was he was doing weekly sort of talks at the Science Circle Sim in Second Life, in fact. But all I ever saw there really was what remained was an auditorium and stuff. It was quite well attended. And I think Thirza was sort of wondering just to what extent the diehards in Second Life, as it were, are sort of interested in moving across into opensim.
I suppose it depends with what Stephen was saying. A lot of the membership of the Science Circle are interested in hearing talks about specific scientific things. I know Stephen has given several talks about aspects of his own real life career and the work he does and the work that he comes into contact with. And I've been over to the Science Circle in Second Life. There was a great thing about the moon not that long ago. Is that right, Stephen? Remember that?
That's
So
correct.
I guess a lot of people kind of go in. Yeah, people come in to actually hear something, whereas to come into OpenSim kind of implies that you're going to build something, I would say. So I suppose...
Well, I would interject that I don't view it as a migration. I think that, the two different installations will be complementary to each other. In Second Life, it's easy to do presentations to a group of people. It is not so easy to make large builds and complicated simulations.
Yeah.
But over an opensim, you can do that. You can make your large build. You can do some very interesting scripting that would, that you could not do over in Second Life. OpenSim actually has some functionalities that Second Life does not have.
Oh, yeah.
So I think that there will be, sort of a two region approach to this, where we'll have nice open public presentations in Second Life, and then places to go in opensim where you can play and interact and try things out.
There's always there's
No, I totally agree with that.
I was just going to say, there's a lot
Yeah,
of
no, I agree with that. And
sorry, I
that,
think we got lag on our
sorry,
voice. Carry on, carry on.
yeah, I want to follow up with what James was saying, and I think to kind of put it in context that, you know, OpenSim and Second Life have these great advantages that are a little bit different from each other. And in many ways, so many of us got to start in Second Life with how we view the platform, how we view the interactions, what it's useful for. And a lot of us, I think, initially thought, well, OpenSim is just this great way of doing a lot of that same stuff. And I think OpenSim, that's just not the case, right? OpenSim has its own trials and tribulations when it comes to traveling, when it comes to teaching people how to use a different viewer and how to log into different grids, even just teleporting between different grids. But then also, as James was saying, it's great for building, but that's not necessarily the only reason why you want to have it. And so there are these special times where you're trying to figure out and differentiate what you want to do with one platform versus the other. And I'll say that the Science Circle as a whole, I'm not sure that we've entirely figured out what we want to do with the OpenSim grid. It's certainly a great place to showcase builds that are useful there. It's a great place to bring in other people. So I think our best example of that is both Nova Archaeology and Max Chatnoir's Genome Island, where those are now spaces that are available for middle school or other professionals out in the field to come into and explore and to get learning opportunities out of them. And so, you know, how a lot of this comes out, how we ultimately use this OpenSim grid, right? If our bread and butter right now is a lot of these volunteer weekend science presentations and chats, we want to keep maintaining that. We don't necessarily feel a need to migrate that over to OpenSim unless there's somehow some sort of special use. So it's one of these things where I'd say we're still figuring it out. But, you know, as Thirza said, you know, when you think about Abyssinia builds where you can basically make a mega region in essence, that's a great place to do it. My understanding of mega regions, and I don't know if you've had any guests along these lines, is that the people who like to do racing and do airplanes in Second Life love OpenSim because you don't have these border crossings that are a real big pain in the butt. And so, you know, when you start thinking about the things that differentiate the two platforms, that's where you keep coming back to how can we best leverage each one for what we want to use it for.
Yeah,
That's true. A lot of it is it's to do with the scripting, and of course, it doesn't have to be racing. It can be all kinds of other quite sophisticated tricks that people are trying to experiment with here in OpenSim. Yeah, it's certainly a very different platform to Second Life.
Lord of the Rings builds were those mega regions?
Yeah, and
they are
if
quite
you've not
large,
been
yeah.
yet, you should go over to his Alexandria build.
Oh,
Now
yeah,
that
yeah.
is massive, and it just keeps getting bigger. And in there it's an army that's marching around. There's the boats, there are all the buildings. That's an incredibly big build, and that you can quite imagine somebody using that as a basis for educating, because it's trying to stick so close to what's known of the archaeology of the region at the time.
Yeah, and
But
human
yes, if you
scale,
didn't have
yeah. Yep.
if you didn't have a mega region, you certainly couldn't do that.
Have you? We had somebody on a couple of weeks ago who based in OpenSim basically, but have been started exploring Frame VR, which is one of the sort of web XR things where he was able to actually build, you know, things in OpenSim and then take them, you know, into a web-based world that look pretty rich for it. You know, have you explored any of that kind of thing? Yeah, for the Science Circle.
I don't see, that's not certainly something we're doing right now. I mean, that is coming back to the idea that OpenSim allows you to import and export things a little more easily as long as it's supporting the file format. You know, one thing that the Science Circle is doing right now, and Robert might be able to talk more about this, is we're very interested in helping create an interactive moon-based project. And so far, the conception of that is largely in Second Life, and it's something we want to be as kind of like a highly available interactive tool for people to learn about the moon base and living on the moon and how that teaches us about science on Earth when you think about what you don't have on the moon when you're there. And so one thing I can imagine is that there will be a phase of that where we'll do some demoing or maybe import-export building on the OpenSim grid in order to help enable what we ultimately do in Second Life. But that one, again, is primarily intended to be a Second Life interactive time.
All right. No, so good. We seem to have come across Mars continuously at the moment.
Yeah,
Right,
because there's a
right.
big thing. There's that Mars building Kitely, isn't there, that Mike Laurie does, where that's
Yeah.
supposed to teach you how to live on Mars.
I think, getting back to the moon might be a nice change.
Yeah. Let's go to Saturn, just mess with
They've
people's
just sent
heads.
a rocket off to Jupiter, haven't they? That'd be fun. Come back in 8 years and we'll tell you all about it.
Well, the Artemis
Well,
program.
just remember,
Yeah, is going to the moon again, right? Isn't that the purpose of Artemis?
yeah, but you see, NASA says when you ask them why are we going to the moon, they will
Yeah.
respond and say so we can go to Mars.
Oh,
So they view it as a first phase of
It's
going out
I got
further.
it. I see. Yep.
I think it was explored in the movie, wasn't it? Where basically the journey to Mars took off as a slingshot to Mars, but it took off from the moon, so you had to get to the moon first. Then they launched for Mars using some kind of slingshot thing. And it's more economical in time or money to do it that way than to try and start from Earth. But
Well, there's no doubt that that ultimately it'll be the most practical way to build a spaceship is to do it in orbit, and so that's what will have to happen.
I was just curious. Is the focus on the moon from an educational standpoint for your learners? Is that because of things like Artemis and NASA going back to the moon, or is it more generalized?
I think it's being driven by the Artemis project, the
Okay.
public interest in that.
Picking that up, yeah, that sounds great. Public enthusiasm is
So,
a big component. Yeah,
yeah, public enthusiasm around moon related stuff is always, and space is always at high, and especially anytime you get a telescope
oh yeah,
that comes along and gives us more pictures of the universe, and that's what we've had recently.
oh my
It
goodness.
just
from the web.
heightens it.
Yeah,
Yeah, James Webb.
I'm
Yeah, the
curious to
James
know
Webb
something
telescope.
else. Can I ask a question to Robert and to Stephen? So obviously, the Science Circle in Second Life is closely related to the grid of the same name here in OpenSim. But do you ever visit other places in OpenSim that have builds that might be interesting to the Science Circle grid? I'm thinking, for example, on Third Rock Grid. I was talking earlier about their Star Trek group, but they have regular meetings where somebody comes in and gives them a talk about exobiology or something, and it's an actual biologist who comes in to give the talk. So it's not Star Trek related; it's real world science related. So do you ever kind of try and connect up with events like that happen in different places? Or maybe you're
Well,
not aware that people do that.
Well, regretfully, I haven't, and I should change that. I definitely should start trying to get out more in the virtual worlds, as it were, and see these other projects.
Yeah, one of the hardest things we've always found in OpenSim, which is kind of the engine that motivates this program, is that so many interesting things are happening that a few people know about, but we kind of fall down when it comes to getting the word out that events are happening and that these fantastic builds have been made. As I was saying before, for example, the historic build of Alexandria, but Fred and his team over on Outworlds have made, or the Star Trek build over on Third Rock Grid, and you could name another 10 different places which have got equally interesting places to visit of all different kinds of subject matter. So our problem is always how to get the information out there, and maybe even as far as Second Life, that these things even exist, because people are missing out. There's so many things to visit and see and learn, and people to connect with who have similar interests. So that's really our aim with our show. It'd be nice to be able to get our word out to the folks living over in Second Life as well. In as Mal always puts it, in the walled garden over on Second Life.
Yeah,
We got some video footage playing in the background when I can find some. This is actually a build of Tesla's laboratory. That would be a very science-based.
Yeah, that's true. That's a really good build over on Littlefield Grid. Yeah.
Yeah. one of the places we went.
Yeah,
There a lot of detail and sort of research gone into it. I don't know about
a
that.
lot of it comes down to it's always the human bandwidth problem.
Yeah.
And so right now, all the people who are pretty active as builders on the Science Circle grid, we do what we can to promote the Open Simulator. We talked about it back at the Open Simulator Community Conference back in December. That was what we gave a presentation. And so I think, I personally am like my extra time that's not spent in Second Life when I'm in OpenSim is trying to that Jon Snow build is now on the Science Circle grid, but all the scripting and all the bot stuff is whack. It's not working. All the bots are hovering in the sky at the borders of the sim.
No.
So there was always this issue of like what is your bandwidth to do that? So one thing that is I think really important, and we're very happy to be guests on the show because we can use this as a way to tell our members that are in Second Life, hey, this is what we have, here's an example, you can listen to this talk about it, and then hopefully that prompts them to come into the grid itself. We'll keep doing that and then just go back and forth and keep trying to work. I would say that right now for Open Simulator for Science Circle, we're still kind of in this germination phase where putting stuff together, we're getting content, we're getting people involved, we're getting structures to do outreach and get people involved in using it, and then we're going from there.
That's wonderful because there's Safari, our hypergrid club. We visited Science Circle, and of course when it was Vive as well, we visited several times because we've been to see Nova's build, which is that archaeological build about the town Portage.
Yeah.
The town I think is in Pennsylvania. Am I right? Yeah,
Yeah.
on the river. And then of course we've been to see Max Chatnoir's build, that one with the huge molecule that you can and the cell
The big
and all
cell,
that
the big
stuff.
cell with lots of molecules.
Yeah, everybody loved that when
Yeah.
we went to see that. And of course we've been to see Skip's build at Abyssinia as well, and the Jon Snow build over the years. And so that's always been very interesting. Everybody's found that fascinating because that's four completely different places, subjects, if you will, and yet they're all fascinating in their own way and such wonderful builds. I do understand that many times people coming from Second Life, they're concerned that they're not going to find the content that they feel they need to be able to make things. But of course, times have changed in OpenSim. Once upon a time, it was really hard to find anything. And now there's just simply masses of people making original content or bringing content in from different 3D websites. So times have changed very much from what it was a few years ago when we first visited the Vibe grid back in the day.
Yeah, and I think come back to your question. Where does the Science Circle OpenSim grid find what we want to do in terms of interacting with the network of OpenSim? Is that your idea of being available for talks or to host talks or to interact with a Star Trek roleplay group? We want to do all that, but we still haven't quite developed the point person and the infrastructure around doing that. But let me say, like I've said it other times before, if there's someone out there and that sounds interesting to you and you would love to volunteer to help us do that, we definitely welcome you.
How's the best way to get in touch with you guys, by the way? Sort of email, Discord, Inworld. What is your preferred way of people getting hold of you?
Yeah, I'm happy to take any sort of emails regarding Science Circle and OpenSim. I try as much as I can be the point person for that. That if you see my name, Stephen Xootfly, XOOTFLY @gmail.com, that's my grid and virtual worlds related email address. So you can email me anytime, or contact me in Second Life with the same name that you're seeing here.
Great.
Yeah, I think it's a wonderful opportunity, isn't it, for people to get in touch and already find like-minded people. That's one of the things that puts people off sometimes from coming over to OpenSim because they feel like that they're going to be alone. But of course, they're not going to be alone because the Science Circle is already a ready-made group of like-minded people.
You have a ready-made base, as it were, from over there to actually send people over here. I'm not saying you should use it to promote everybody comes over here, but people do. It's very tribal. People often don't come on their own. They migrate to OpenSim as maybe they had a particular role play group in Second Life, and it's suddenly more economical to do it on OpenSim. So the tribe it comes as a whole. So in some ways, they could just do more, better, cheaper.
That's true.
But I was wondering, there's two aspects to this. It's something I've always been fascinated with. Is you have a lot of things that are actually role plays, so you could almost consider them to be a game, but they're also crossover into education, as opposed to, I don't know, a load of people playing being bunny rabbits and doing whatever bunny rabbits do. So, but I remember one of the first, most interesting things I ever saw in Second Life was a build of ancient Rome. And at first I thought, I don't know, they stopped me getting in. They said, "Oh, you've got to, they weren't selling it, but they insisted I put on a toga and all that sort of stuff." And so I thought, "Oh, go through all this stuff. I just want to come and have a look around, please." No, no, no. You've got to be in play, and basically, it's just that I looked right, I suppose. If anybody was filming it, I don't know. But what I rapidly discovered was that there were quite a lot of people there, and they were all actually role playing. And some of them were role playing like the cleaners and the people who maintained the ancient baths, and the plumbing system under Rome. The others who played senators and the whole thing, and they were all working in character. So when you got there, you weren't just seeing the wonderful rebuilt architecture and stuff. You really got a feel for wandering around it because of it wasn't NPCs. It was just avatars in this group who were kind of role playing. And suddenly I thought, hang on, this is more than just role play. This is highly educational too. So
That's right. It's what they call experiential archaeology, isn't it? Where you try and put yourself in the shoes of the person. In that time.
I didn't have to role play except for wear a costume, but because I was surrounded by people, every time.
What, you mean you weren't a slave driver, Mel? I can't believe it.
I went back for that later.
Yeah,
So,
as a former educator, when you think about the opportunities you have to use these virtual worlds for like a role play like educational experience, I think that's still really hard to do, to be able to put into an assessment schematic. That how do you give one student an A versus how do you give another student a D, right? Because you still have to assess what they are or not learning.
Right.
Now I know there was somebody, I think, who did Tudor history. She was an educator. I remember hearing about this. What she did was she could track what people did or did not say, and they had to basically achieve certain things that were correct or incorrect. So basically, she was almost like grading a conversational essay, and that was something that would be an accessible assignment. And one thing that's kind of cool about OpenSim or other places that you can record all the local chat that's happening, and that would be a way to enable some of those things going on. But I think you also point out something really interesting too, which is not just in formal institutions, but in this area, this rather vague area of lifelong learning. Anybody could come, if anybody could build like a Tudor or a ancient Egypt or a Roman, that they built enough prompts, enough information within the world, someone could learn a decent amount of real, true history of those areas by engaging in role play, as long as the place was also built in a way to teach you as you went along. And so I think that's a great space and opportunity to do these types of things. And that's something
it also prevents young people from the usual resistance to the information, because they get so involved in trying to figure something out. Like as in your build, I remember your Jon Snow build. The idea is it's a bit of a mystery. You're going to figure out how this happened, which of course it was at the time. It really was a mystery that needed to be solved. And when you present something under those terms, of course it becomes a drama. The person becomes emotionally involved in trying to figure something out. People love to be asked questions. So.
Yeah, and I think, and to me, that was one thing I was very cognizant of as a teacher, was I had to make sure I could build an assessment that when they turned in their report, that I asked them to write it in a way that gave what were the clues, what was the supporting logic, what was the things that you experienced. And so that way I had a report that I could say I was assessing in terms of what they did inside the build. But that was really challenging to build it that way. Let me just say, to some degree at the time, I was always like, why don't more people build this type of great stuff? But then once you get into it and you get, feedback on it, you're like, wow, that's really hard to do really well.
Well, and I also wonder about, I mean, every instructor has to deal with an institution, who is evaluating the curriculum and evaluating the technology.
That's true.
And I just, a question I had was, how are institutions looking at something like opensim as compared to, oh my goodness, Second Life, Roblox, all the things that are out there? Is there any institutional front runner in your assessment?
Wow. That's almost like a great topic for another show.
It is another show, yeah.
Sure,
yeah.
let's do that then, because we can sadly close to the end of our
Well,
time.
I'm no longer an educator either, so I sidestepped that issue myself.
Yeah, I'll say that, I think they're great examples of people who've used opensim and Second Life really well for teaching. I think there's some people who had kind of great starts but kind of fizzled. Yeah. One thing that the Science Circle is looking at in terms of that niche is to come back to these people who are just science enthusiasts. They're maybe older, they're independent, they're not in school anymore. What are the opportunities we can have for people to keep learning and engaging their brains and minds in science and to meet professionals and to network? And so I think to some degree would be a little bit more of a focus we would do, is that here we are as a trusted nonprofit registered institution with professionals. People can come to us as a reliable source of good people doing that type of work, and how can we get you involved?
Oh yeah. Yep.
Sounds great.
The other thing that occurs to me is on a similar front is probably the power of language education using Second Life but to a certain extent Second Life, where you learn a language by engaging in conversations, be it with NPCs or proper speaking people. So you have a build, and it reminds me of when I was back in O-level days. It was I was the first to get an audio-visual French lesson. It was bloody appalling, but the idea was that you approach somebody and you did your best to ask for something in the grocery, and then you get the reply in French, and then you'd have to practice the interaction. You were later assessed on whether the experience had actually taught you anything. So the assessment wasn't wouldn't be inside the virtual thing, but the virtual thing is like going to a place and trying out what you can do. And it's used in the medical profession too, of course, these days. So,
sure.
It's not.
Since we're getting to the end of our time now, Stephen and Robert, can we ask you one last thing? What would you like to see as the future of the Science Circle in opensim? What's the one thing you would like to see?
Robert, we want you to go
Well, okay. You see, I think we're taking a good direction right now. That as we build these interactive exhibits, that will be a very good use of our time in opensim. I think the main thing to do is to keep working on it and to get people interested and have them come over.
Excellent. And you, Stephen, what do you think? What's on your wish list for the future of the Science Circle in opensim? Keep it clean.
I would say it's twofold. Is that I will keep it clean. One, that if there are people who are really enthusiastic and have some of the basic building skills, but just wish they had the space to build something sciencey, that they come in, and we're providing that space. But the other one really is that next level of when we have a space like Nova Archaeology, Abyssinia, Genome Island, the Exploratorium, that we're really creating an almost museum-like experience or learning opportunity experience, both either for, say, actual middle schoolers or high schoolers to learn these things, and for us to collaborate with educators and teachers to build syllabi and learning lessons, that become just a routine part of people being able to do actual regular classwork with our builds. And we're happy to collaborate with people on that.
Yeah.
And so I think that's where the space of opensim becomes. And, to come back to your question about places that used Open Simulator a lot, there are a lot of K through 12 educational places. When you think about like SPIF, or there's a Florida place, I'm blanking on their name, they had middle schoolers, and they wanted them to experience virtual world types of things, and they couldn't use Second Life for that because that's not great. And so opensim was a place where you could host stuff yourself, build stuff around it, build a community to keep building And the thing that always seems to miss out is that building positive inertia always going forward and to keep maintaining that. That's my wish list would in the end result in saying I hope that we can build that positive inertia where basically every year we look back at the Science Circle grid and opensim as a whole, where we're just like, oh, all this great positive momentum and something new and better every year.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, I just put up very briefly on the other screen. There's nothing much to show, but sciencecircle.org. For example, Stephen here has well, this is a link actually. So, but like an example of videos featuring Stephen. They're all a bit old, but I'm sure they might be interesting to some of you.
So Science Circle has a YouTube channel, and we used to routinely video record presentations, panel discussions, all those. We lost some of that audio-visual capability, but we're actually back and new. So we do have new YouTube content that's coming up. Even just yesterday, they gave a VW BPE 2023 recap. And so there's lots of new content on our YouTube channel, the Science Circle YouTube channel.
Yeah,
Fantastic.
post-pandemic forum, post-mortem. I hadn't seen some of these before, so it was quite exciting to just follow the link. And there's your moon base, of course, project, with a little film on that as well. So people, basically, you can go to the Science Circle on YouTube, and there's quite a few things here, mostly under videos, but and going back a good many years. So, yeah. So, yes.
Well, the Science Circle has been around. We're currently this year celebrating our 15th anniversary. And so we're trying to intercalate a few anniversary types of things. I think really in terms of science interest groups that have been active in Second Life or the virtual world, we're one of the most active, longest living ones.
I was just going to say, that's 15th anniversary in Second Life and beyond kind of thing. It's an SL anniversary. So that's about the same as me. Well, no, I'm a bit older than that, but yeah. It's a long time. I sometimes turn around and think, my God, I've been doing this for 20 years. What happened?
Where'd the time go?
Well, thank you guys so much for being here. And as Stephen said, there's subjects for other times. Can we ask you both, maybe you could come back another time and visit with us again and talk about the other aspects of the Science Circle?
Well,
Very happy to anytime.
I think it's quite interesting. You actually say, let's start off here. We run a little grid for our Second Life Science Circle members who want to get acquainted with opensim. That's nice. When just a quick thing is when people, I won't go into whether people can get an avatar on your grid or anything, but when people log into your grid for the first time, is there a specific landing area that they can expect, or a kind of introduction thing, or do they just teleport to Abyssinia or wherever they think is most interesting?
Yeah, Augustine built a pretty nice welcoming center. It's just called the Welcome Zone.
Yeah.
It has a couple freebie mesh avatars. You can look as good as I am looking right now if you want to be a male. There's some female ones too. And then each one of these has nice little teleport signs that can take you to the specific content that you're interested in on the grid.
Okay, wonderful. Well, I think we better call it quits there. It's been on there for about an hour, so it's been a great, interesting show. Mm-hmm. And as Thirza says, look forward to maybe having you back or involved in a specific thing at another point. I'd like to thank again our guests from the Science Grid. Science Circle Grid. Get that right one day. Stephen Xootfly. And I'm going to try.
Tyragia.
He's going to practice, Robert, before next time you come on the show. He'll be word perfect next time you come on. How's that?
Guy.
No, he isn't.
Yeah. Thank you, Robert. Thanks for being here. Like the hat as well. That's a good touch. We all like that. Right, okay. My thanks also to James Atlloud for all the technical wizardry going on in the background. That's some very interesting questions today, which is great. And of course, my wonderful co-host, Thirza Ember. Thank you,
Thanks,
Thirza.
Mel. It's been a great show.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
And yes, I will be your friend, Stephen. Mustn't forget that, must he? It's okay being a friend. I've
That's right.
just that's in here too. And of course, I've forgotten. I've got footage of you from OSCC as well, but that's another thing. Right. Okay. Well, it's been a great show. As I said, thank you all for being here. And we will be back with another show in World Review this time next week. Don't forget Safari midweek if you want to come and explore those exciting places. And for now, I guess we're out of here. So I'm going to wish you all a very good morning, or a very good afternoon, a very good evening, or indeed a good tomorrow, depending on wherever and whenever you are. And we're out of here. Bye for now.